everyone, to the Rick and Dave podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dave Stein, joined by my fellow real estate investor, Rick Boehm. Rick, say hello to the fans.
Hello, everyone.
On our podcast, we are hoping to dive into the world of real estate, wealth building, talk through all of the scenarios, all of the things that can go good, bad, and the ugly within real estate and wealth building. Rick, I'm so excited for today's episode. Today, we are talking about fear. The fear of real estate as a whole, specifics, general, everything in between. But before we do that, why don't you start with a quick introduction?
Well, I'm Rick Boehm. I've been in real estate for a couple of years now. I'm a Pace Morby Gator lender. I'm also in sub 2 with Pace Morby. I've talked at the Fargo Moorhead meetup. One of the things, Dave, that I come across no matter where I go is this fear. Fear of getting into real estate. I have had these fears, and I'm so looking forward to today's conversation because I think we're going to go through some common fears and some solutions. There's solutions to every real estate problem you can come up with. Mm-hmm. And we're going to go through some common sense solutions to some of these fears. First, Dave, let's hear something about yourself.
Yeah, so Dave Stein, I've been a licensed real estate agent with the Hatch team, part of Real Brokerage, for a little over 4 years now. I'm also in the same groups you are, the Pace Morby sub 2 community, as well as the Pace Morby Gator community. I was looking to diversify my real estate knowledge and portfolio, both personally for my wife and I in our real estate portfolio, but also for my clients. And what a fantastic community that we get to be a part of. And it's changed just my whole viewpoint on real estate and just frankly business in general, because it's so cliche, but it's so true that the options are endless. There's so many different ways that you can do real estate, business transactions, buying businesses, everything in between. But the thing that stops 98% of people, the fear of something going wrong, the fear of money, the fear of bad tenant, you name it, it is out there. So let's jump in.
Dave, I started to put together kind of a mental list of common fears that I was starting to hear after, and you were there after the What is Gator Talk at the Fargo Moorhead real estate meetup, because I got a lot of questions like, what about this? What about this? What about this? And so I started to put together a mental list in my head of the common threads that I was hearing from people that are interested in real estate investing, because there's money to be made in real estate, but it comes with its fair share of anxieties and apprehensions, and I wrote down a few, and I'll just go through a few, and we can pick a couple out and talk about them. Fear of overpaying for properties. Dave, I'm going to overpay. I just know I'm going to overpay. What do I do? Fear of interest rate increases. Dave, what if I get into this property and interest rates start to go up, or maybe from the time I put an offer in to the time I close, interest rates go up. Mm-hmm. What about location? What happens if the location? What if I buy a multifamily in the location, or even a single family, and I'm going to rent it out, and the neighborhood goes downhill? What do I do? And what are some things that we could do to the property to mitigate those? How about maintenance costs? What happens if the economy goes downhill and money becomes really tight? What if money becomes really tight on my budget? And what if I start to have issues making my budgetary requirements? What do I do? How do I prevent that from happening? Right. property management. How do I, how do I get in with a good property management company? Because I don't know a thing about them, Dave.
Yep.
How about bad tenants?
Bad tenants.
Bad tenants. What if you get, what do I do? How do I get rid of them? How do I prevent good, how do I get good tenants in the first place? Negative cash flow. What if I get in a multifamily, Dave, and I start to lose money? Fear of property damage. What if my tenants wreck the place?
Right.
Market volatility, fear of debt. Dave, what if I hate being in debt? What if I have to take out money and I've got this loan on this property? I'm not used to having a loan.
Dave Ramsey says you shouldn't have it, right?
Well, so let's go through a couple of these. Dave, why don't you pick one out and let's talk about it?
Yeah, I think to summarize, Rick, what I heard was essentially some big categories, big themes: finances and money. I don't know what I'm doing, so experience, and the fear of the things going wrong, all like property damage, bad tenant, bad insurance, like you name it, anything going wrong, like the fear of the unknown and it going wrong.
Yep, very much so.
I think the first one we should pick on and dissect is experience, because very common, Rick, we hear, I don't even know where to start. I see it. I see the social media feeds like, hey, if you want to be a bazillionaire, get into real estate. If you want to get your first property, do this and then this and then this. And it's not always as clean cut as they make it seem like on social media. But when we talk about the fear of inexperience, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm very fearful. Like I have this with first time home buyers all the time. And they're not doing anything creative. They're not doing anything out of the norm. They go to a bank or a lender, they get pre-approved, they go see houses, and they'll still have this hesitation of, what if something goes wrong? What if I'm making a $200,000 mistake with this house? So imagine that fear being amplified 10x now that it's a second property and we have a second mortgage and we have all of the fears that come to be, but they're usually the worst in our heads than they are in real life. And that's the beauty. But when we talk to folks, Rick, both in the Gator community, in the Sub-2 community, in the real estate investment groups in our local areas, it usually comes down to, I don't know where to start. What is step one? So, Rick, from your perspective, as an active investor and someone who's looking to acquire properties, tell me your story about what's held you back so far.
Well, I go back to the feelings I had when I acquired my first property. And that was our first single family house. And it was like I felt like I was on an island, and I had all these people trying to sell me something, and I didn't have a good resource or community that I could go ask questions to. Mm-hmm. And I think now we're in an age where communities and resources are more readily available. For myself, I found, there's numbers and numbers. If you go into Facebook and you just go into real estate investing, and whether you go, you can go single family homes, you can put in a local market, you can find all sorts of groups that are out there that have people in them that are looking for similar housing or investment situations that you are, and you can form a community of people that you can converse with and bounce ideas off of, and sometimes share your deal and say, do you think this is what mistakes do you think I might be making on this? Mm-hmm. I didn't have those, that kind of support when I, of course that was, 30 years ago. So when I start to look at getting into acquisition, my first anxiety is always, boy, what if I don't know what I'm doing? I need to find some people I can bounce stuff off of. And that's where, we're blessed in the fact that we are in the Pace Morby Gator and Sub 2 group, but there's a lot of other groups that are out there that are super valuable. And,
Absolutely.
you always have to go out and evaluate each person's input to make sure if you think it's factual or not, and maybe get a multitude of different people.
Mhm.
But that, having somebody who can look at your property, maybe do some underwriting, maybe do some comping with you. I find that immensely helpful.
Mhm.
There was we just Dave, I just looked at a possible rental here in town, and it seemed overpriced. And I was actually looking at it with another real estate investor here in town,
Mhm.
and they really like this property. This is a property they've wanted for a long time.
Okay.
And so this was almost sentimental to them. Their heart was really pulling at this property by me more than their analytical, mind per se. And
Emotional.
so I took the property and I took it to somebody who I trust in the Fargo market, and I said, "Give me your thoughts on this. This feels like it might be a little overpriced,
Mhm.
and tell me the look at." And I showed him the P&Ls. I showed him all the information.
Yeah.
I went through what the inspector had found, some of the questions, and he came back with some great, great feedback. And so developing those networks of people you can go trust, and anybody can do this, Dave. Believe it or not, I'm kind of an introvert. I'm kind of shy. I'm not one that, it might surprise you, but I'm not like one that goes out and just, goes and meets people intuitively. I do that on purpose. I've learned to do that,
Right.
but it's not something that comes super easy.
Yeah. And it drains you probably afterwards.
you know so that's kind of the first thing that I do is I go out and I find people that are in similar situations as me, and I network with them.
Or sometimes people that are ahead of you, and that, like you said, you're just willing, like, hey, Johnny, someone that's objective, they have no say, they have no input. Can you just run this through your process and tell me your thoughts? And I think that's the biggest piece is finding that group and getting into some sort of network, some sort of group of people, group of investors, group of business people, whatever it is, that you can go and ask questions and just get their objective feedback. Whether you like it or not is irrelevant, but it's like, here's, as I see it, here's the concern I see or the opportunity that I see. Um, yeah, and we're just, once you start talking things out, a lot of those fears that you probably initially started with started to eviscerate. Now, it doesn't, just because you and I talk about our property doesn't mean that all of our fears are gone. But getting that objective set of eyes and ears, a third party's opinion, preferably someone that, again, is ahead of you, that has done it before, that has gone through the steps, that has probably failed, and now is able to teach you their lessons that they've failed on. It's just incredibly, incredibly important to find that group.
If you're not failing, you're not trying.
100%.
Now, you just recently acquired a new property.
Correct.
What kind of, when you're going into this, what are the things that, no matter how many times besides the excitement, the I can't wait to get in this property. You had to get to that point, you had to overcome some apprehensions.
Right.
you know can you kind of go through what things go through your mind as you're getting into properties?
Absolutely. So certainly being a licensed real estate agent, and having a fairly successful career, I've gone into hundreds of homes, right? And each time not every time, but there are a lot of properties where like, I wonder if I can do this. I wonder if I should buy this. Should Callie and I, my wife Callie and I, should we look at this as an investment? And it took 2 years of even having my license and closing deals. It took 2 years for us, and it was kind of just thrust upon us in that had a family member that could no longer live in their home. Family asked if we, Callie and I, were interested in buying it because they knew that we were kind of looking at building a real estate portfolio. And so then it was like, where are we going to get the money? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? And so we jumped through some hurdles. We went through the wickets, but we ended up acquiring our first property. And we've been super fortunate that it's been a super successful investment property for us for the last 2 years. And then again, we weren't like, we're always kind of looking, but we're not serious. We're not like dedicating quality time to scouring for opportunities. Another property was on the market for a while. I had sent it to her like, hey, what do you think about this for a second? So we're kind of in the midterm rental space. We like to do fully furnished condos for medical professionals. One that looked decent from the pictures. We went and saw it. We tried to figure out, would this make sense, location. But again, we ran into this like, okay, how are we going to finance it? How are we going to do down payment? Are we going to try to do something creative? And we went through all of the motions. But yeah, July 12th, 14th, whatever, a couple of Fridays ago, I think it was the 12th, we closed on it. And again, we're super fortunate, Rick. We had a tenant on the next day. So we actually had to scramble for 24 hours to close on it, clean it, furnish it, and have our first tenants roll right in 24 hours later, not even 24 hours later. But it was like, hey, we've done this before. We looked at our own system. How did we do comparables? You mentioned comping earlier. How did we do that? So we're able to negotiate some price, able to negotiate some things here and there. And now we're in property number 2, and both of them are, fully occupied. So super, super blessed, but it took that first step. It was just getting in that first door, thinking about the first property, and now we're looking at trying to go for number 3.
Dave, something else that I took away from that Fargo talk that I gave was, Rick, what about this paperwork? This paperwork I don't understand this. I don't know if I'm using the right paperwork. And I read all of this, and it reads like a contract, and it's hard to understand. And I can take that and I can apply it to the acquisition, that whole mind frame directly, because when I read like a PSA, a purchase sale agreement, sometimes, especially if it's your first time, it can be confusing
and daunting for sure.
And so how do you educate people that are not used to contracts, from the acquisition point of view? How do you alleviate those fears, and how do you get them past that apprehension?
So I think the one thing that we've already mentioned is getting in that network, getting plugged in to a local group of folks that you could send a contract to. And again, there's a reason that we joined this particular community in the Sub 2 community and in the Gator community. We wanted someone that has had the experience, that has gone before us and now produces templated documents that, again, you can Google PSAs, purchase agreements, purchase sales agreements. You can Google all the things, but has a lawyer, an attorney looked at it? Has it been run through a title company to see like what are the gotchas or the hiccups or what have you? But just reaching out and just talking through, hey, this 12-page document, can we talk through what each of these things means? Because if the party doesn't know, then you should stop everything and stop the movement until you figured out are we on the same page for what this clause means? Are we in agreement, right? The meeting of the minds is something that you'll hear attorneys use, but if you and I are doing a deal and I'm acquiring and you are offloading, are we in agreement on the contract itself? Have we both read it and understood it so that it doesn't create havoc down the road? But reaching out to a Dave Stein, reaching out to a Rick Bain, saying, hey, I have this contract, or I submitted this, or someone submitted this to me because I own a property. Could you look it over and tell me, your thoughts? Heck yeah, let's do that. Let's jump on a Zoom. It'll only take 5-10 minutes to make sure to answer the questions, or maybe it's a 30-minute Zoom and maybe we become part of the deal, or maybe we don't. Like, talking it out with someone who's done it before is key.
Having the courage to admit what we don't know is tough. But once we get over that fear of just letting people know, I don't know, let's go slow. Explain this to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I learned early on with real estate and Gator lending. Because in Gator lending, there's a lot of contract. You got to learn joint venture agreements. You've got to learn wholesale agreements. You've got to learn PSAs. There's a lot of different stuff and when you're going over this stuff, oftentimes especially when you're in the acquisition type, and also when you're the seller, but you always feel as if the deal's got to get done today. And if it doesn't get done today, oh my goodness, somebody else might come in and get it.
So true.
And what often happens is we skip over stuff. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you can do that and get lucky and be safe, but most often I shouldn't say most, you're always better off taking the time to go through it with somebody. And if you don't understand, say, have Rick or Dave, or your local agent or somebody in your community walk you through this and say, this is what this is saying. Mm-hmm. This is what this will do. Because you don't want to enter into a contract and just simply look for these spots where your initials go and initial it. Mm-hmm. You really do want to take the time and read it. And if you're not comfortable with that, find somebody and do it with you. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, I'm just such a believer that it's worth taking the time. If that you lose the deal in that situation, it's better to lose a deal than to go into a deal and have it be a bad deal because you didn't understand the contract. Mm-hmm. That's just one of my core beliefs.
Absolutely. I couldn't add anything more of value. It is imperative to, if you are not comfortable, pair up with someone who is, or say, hey, this doesn't make sense. Ask the questions. I want to make sure that we're on the same page. Because again, the worst spot is when you're upside down or in a bad spot because of a clause, a contract, sometimes it's not even intentional. Like, we assume in general, people are trying to do right and we assume positive intent. That's something that we use at Hatch. Sometimes it's unintentional, but now you're toast because you signed a legally binding contract that prevents you from doing something, or whatever the situation is. But past contracts, past the fear, the other big thing that I've heard a lot of people talk fearful wise is money. Or I don't have the money. I don't have enough money for down payment. I don't have money to start my own investing. You name it, and add the word money into the sentence. And we've heard that as far as, this is the reason I can't get into real estate investing. Walk me through your particular scenario, or one of the folks that you've worked with, on how did you overcome that fear?
Well, I think it comes down to looking at the fear of not having enough money to get into a deal. There are deals where well, first off, let me walk that back just a sec. there are deals that you should not get into because they're not financially doable. And Rick and Dave aren't here to give you financial advice with any of our broadcasts.
Correct.
But that said, there are also those times where you might get into a deal and you simply might not have the liquidity, or you might not just want to use your funds because you want to have some cash reserves set aside for, your own other responsibilities.
Yeah.
And in those situations, don't let that fear stop you, because there's solutions. And that's where, and that it might go a little bit beyond this particular broadcast, but that's where reaching out to someone like Rick or Dave, and our contact information is up on the screen. We can absolutely get you in. Dave, there's a lot of people out there that are called private money investors.
Okay.
And they will let you use your money for a return
let you use their money.
Let you use their money. So, so if you're going to put in, let's say I'm buying a property and I've got to put in an earnest money deposit on this property. And if I do that, I've got other responsibilities coming out at the end of the month. I don't want to really, I don't want to leave my budget that tight. There's our private money lenders, who will let you use their money. You're going to have to pay them that principal back plus a return.
Mm-hmm.
But to get into a property, there's also, people that will do some short-term lending to get you into a property and then, you may have to go get a secondary loan to pay that back.
Sure.
With a return. But there's always solutions out there. In fact, there's always, Dave, one of the things that I've learned since I've been in real estate is there are more creative solutions to real estate. There is no problem that you can come up with as far as a real estate transaction that hasn't come up before. And 99.999% of the time, there's a creative solution for it if you look hard enough, if the deal is good and the numbers make sense. Now, if the numbers don't make sense, obviously you shouldn't get into the deal. But if the numbers make sense and you're creative and you look for some help within a community, you'll find some help.
Right. I mean, in our communities, again, this is not necessarily a plug for the Pace Morby communities, but again, we're blessed that we're a part of these. And Pace just released, I think, his 4th list. I can't remember the number, but there's a private money lender list in our community, and it totaled millions of dollars. There are millions of dollars out there of individuals that are saying, I want to be a private money lender. I want to have my money that I'm investing in tied to real estate. I'll get a return, and helping an investor get into flip a property, rent out a property, whatever the situation is. There's money out there. There's lots of money out there, and people they like the security of their investment being tied to real estate. Just saying I don't have the money is not really a good enough excuse. Now, again, we're not financial advisors. We're not budget coaches. Rick mentioned earlier, if you're living month to month and you don't have an extra little bit in case something goes bad, now is maybe not the time to put forth your emergency savings to get into a property. But if you could be part of a team, if you could do some calling, if you could do some door knock, there is opportunities for you to still get into real estate, get your foot in the door, no pun intended, without using your own money. And I think private money lenders is just one example.
Well, and a couple of things that I also think it's really good for people to keep in mind is one, if if you've got some money, or if you've got some money in a 401k that's you can self-direct,
Mhm.
and you want to make some returns on that money via real estate, and you don't know where to go, don't just step in and just go to the first deal that you come up with. That's where Dave Stein, Rick Boehm can really help you get on a good deal, because we can help you vet it, we can help you analyze it, we can help you underwrite it, and if we can't do it, we'll get you in contact with the people that can, and walk you through to make sure the ultimate responsibility is still on the lender, but we can help you do that, and get you on a good deal. Secondly, often, one of the things that I often hear people say is, I had no idea there were people out there that essentially are acting like the bank and lending for enable me to buy this property. And what my question to them is I always have a follow-up question, and it's this: well, have you ever heard of people going to a relative to borrow some money to buy a property? Well, yeah, I did that on my first property. I borrowed money from my uncle Leo and I paid it back to him. Well, that's private money lending right there. You
Yep.
know, so
And imagine not ruining Thanksgiving dinner because Uncle Leo's still waiting for his money back, and timelines are running a little bit long. And when let's be very clear, Rick, that everything we say, when you're dealing with real estate, there is risk there. And what we do is we vet, underwrite, verify. We do all of the safety protocol things that we absolutely can to reduce the risk. But it's just life. There's just things happen, tornadoes happen, floods happen, contractors go crazy, or they don't finish the job, or tenant. You can have a bad tenant. Like there's no 100% guarantee that everything that we can do that you'd be like, yeah, this is 100% guarantee and there's no risk at all. There's always risk, just like there's risk investing in the stock market or you name it, right? But we do our best to mitigate those risks.
the beautiful thing about lending on real estate is not only, oftentimes the results are in double digits in there and they can be fruitful. But here's the difference: is if Dave, if you come to me and you say, Rick, I need to borrow some money for, I'm buying this given item, I have no recourse if you don't pay me back. But if you say, Rick, I'm buying this piece of land, this piece of property with a house on it, and I was wondering if you could help me finance this, so that if if I don't, and if I don't pay you back, you're agreeing to give them the property and the house with that first deed, that first lien position agreement. You're obligated to pay them back, or they're going to foreclose on you and they will get your house and land. That's the difference with real estate, is there is some security there to the lender, because they're actually lending on something they can acquire, loan to own, so to speak, if you don't pay. It gives you great motivation to pay your loan back along with the return.
Rick, let's pivot to our the third bucket that I kind of identified, and I think what we can tie it up there, maybe go to a part two, because again, there's just so much here. I think
Yeah.
that third bucket is the fear of the unknown. Economic fears. I heard you mention bad tenants, bad house. What if you buy a lemon? Like, what are all these things that could happen that would be adverse to us jumping into real estate? Talk me through that.
Well, everybody, here's the best way I approach this, Dave. We live, all of us tend to remember the one bad thing that ever happened to us, and we never remember the 99 good things that happened to us.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking to real estate investors, if we just come across one who had a troubled tenant, who put some holes in the wall, who they had to evict, we tend to remember that.
Mm-hmm.
but we don't remember all the good. If you go out and talk to landlord, they're going to tell you the vast majority are really good, good tenants,
Yeah.
and you don't have issues with them. We
Right.
only remember the bad things.
Right.
So that's first. We have to put some perspective on this, and then that's where using again good, working with your community and using good screening tools to when you get tenants in, work. Now you can choose, and maybe something else we can do in another podcast is talk about the difference between using a property management company, which that there is a cost there, that will help you screen people and monitor the property, or if you're going to choose to do it yourself. If you're choosing to do it yourself, the responsibility will be all upon you to do the screening, to do the eviction, to do the property maintenance and management. If you're using a company, they will help you with that. But at the end of the day, we need to properly screen people so that they're rightly qualified to come live in our properties. And we need to have lease agreements that clearly state what their responsibilities are, what they are not, and the consequences of them getting in and not abiding by the lease agreement.
Absolutely. So what I heard was, what if all these things go wrong? We remember that. What I heard was reaching back out to your community, reaching back out and asking, how did you mitigate? Either use a property management company. So who is a property management company that you would recommend? Hey, Rick, do you have any lease agreements that you've used? Hey, Rick, how did you screen your tenants? I know you do your own property management. How did you screen your tenants? Asking the questions of people that have gone before you. But I think the biggest question to ask, and it's to ask yourself, is what if it goes right? What if what we do goes well, and we now have an asset that is appreciating in value? The tenant is paying off whatever sort of loan, if you have a loan on it, whether it's institutional or private or hard money. Regardless, it's appreciating in value. Someone's paying off your loan, and you might even be able to kick some cash flow. So you might be able to start doing extra things with your family, your loved ones that you wanted to do, but your current employment or your current living situation did not allow for that. Now you're bringing in some extra cash. What if it goes right? What if you acquire these properties and you get one bad tenant, but the other 99 are good? That's what I need to think about.
Absolutely. And I think of, working with somebody who's done this before will help you get a game plan in place or a financial plan, so that once you've got tenants in your property and it begins to bring in, monthly cash, you can set aside a reserve of cash for those repairs and unforeseens that happen. So when they happen, you've got some cash reserves sitting there waiting for those purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it's important that we don't judge ourselves in the short term. We buy these properties, if they're long buy and holds, in a longer term. So if we're buying a property just to turn around and resell it, then of course, we'd be judging ourselves by the resale value. But if we're buying and holding, we're buying these properties for cash returns, for appreciation. And so we have to, even if something in the short term does happen, you need to take the long-term approach to these properties.
Yes. So man, I think that's a great way to wrap it up in that we're playing the long game. This is not the get rich quick scheme. There's money to be had in real estate, absolutely. Can you make a killing in a couple of deals? Of course. But your mindset should be long term. And it's mostly relationships, and really we're really trying to help people. We're really trying to help solve an issue, whether it's for the homeowner who can't pay their mortgage, whether it's an investor that needs to offload a property, whether we're trying to create more affordable housing for those that can't necessarily buy their own house. Like, we are solutions driven to help people, and just happen to make a couple of bucks on the side. So, but playing the long game, building relationships, that's probably the biggest key takeaway for me today.
You know, and maybe we will pick this up in a second Fear podcast.
Yeah.
You know, in the meantime, Dave, if somebody needs to get a hold of you, how can they contact you?
I got my handle right here. I'm going to get it right one of these times. At Dave Stein 29, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. You know, anytime I join a social media app, that's the handle. That's the best way to get a hold of me. How about you?
You know, again, you know, my Instagram is right there. You can. We've also got a professional R&K Property Investments Facebook page.
Mm-hmm.
You can look me up, Rick Boehm, on Facebook. You can DM me. You know, shoot me a DM. I'll give you my phone number. We'll jump on a Zoom. You know, I set up Zoom. I've got Zoom scheduled virtually every day of the week. You know, just shoot me a DM. We'll get together. Love to sit down and talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I look forward to our next episode.
Dave, thanks so much. Till next time.
All right, Rick, take care.
Yep. Bye-bye.